seconds.
Is this where the damn drumming and the music kicks in?
Yeah. Is going on, everybody? Hello and welcome back to On the Pipe podcast. Yes, that is my dog barking in the background. The door is open. She sees people out there. Don't mind her. She sounds a lot meaner than what you would think a golden doodle would sound like. But nevertheless, today is Tuesday, September the 10th, 2024, years after zero. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Shepherdson. And we're just in time for this week's episode of OTP Tuesday. We got some racing to talk about from all over the country, from the West Coast to the East Coast, and I guess all sorts of stuff in between, because the National Enduro this past weekend was out in Missouri. We're going to talk about that one here in just a moment. We had the Worcs races that was going on out on the left coast, and also it was a round of the AMA West Hare Scramble series. So we're going to talk about those results as well. Before we head into this weekend, round number 11 of the GNCC series at the Mountaineer, just outside of Beckley, West Virginia. Personally, one of my favorite racetracks. I think it is one of the newest, if not the newest, circuit on the GNCC series. I raced that place the first race that they had there, and yeah, it was just like an old school. At that time, there had never been a race there. So it was like an old school GNCC track, pretty technical, really rocky. And the past several years, I've just been able to go out there and film some stuff. It looks like a lot of the same tracks and trails are used, but I mean, I think there's like 13,000 or 10,000 acres out at that place. So hopefully get a little change up in it, but no doubt one of the favorite racetracks of the year for a lot of riders. Get back to that old school Hare Scramble feeling out there. So we'll be heading there this weekend to bring you some coverage of that. If you haven't checked out our YouTube recaps, make sure you do that. youtube.com/onthepipepodcast. As I mentioned before, we're going to be changing some of that here in just a little bit. I think I'm going to move the shows over to their own channel, so that way the videos and everything can stay where they're currently at, make it a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier to find the shows versus find the videos. And we got some other cool video stuff in the works coming up, so that is what we're trying to transition towards. So keep you updated with all of that, but don't forget, every Sunday after the race, Sunday night at some point. Sometimes, a couple times I got it up before dark. Sometimes it's 11 o'clock at night. Just depends on how good the internet is, wherever we are at or wherever I'm driving from. But for those that don't know, if you listen to the show, we do a video recap of each and every GNCC race, and did some with TKO and some other random one-off races. But you can go on there and check those raw race clips out. Is exactly how I see the race from the racetrack. Try to catch them like 2 or 3 times a lap, so it ends up being about 30 minutes of race footage. Gets Reba going, as you can hear in the background. She gets excited about racing. But yeah, let's dive right into it. We'll start things off at the Flying W National Enduro that took place this past weekend in Missouri. We have seen Josh Toth go on an absolute tear this season. I think he clicked off 6 or 7 National Enduro wins in a row. Well, his unbeaten streak came to an end this past weekend by none other than Stuart Baylor Jr., the 5-time National Enduro champion. Has not been clicking off the race wins that we expected to see him do, but now he is back to winning style. Just over 3 seconds ahead of Josh Toth was Stu Baylor when the dust settled this past weekend after 6 tests of racing. Heading into test number 4, I think he was down 8 seconds and then went out and won test 5 by a good little clip, about 13, 14 seconds, to take over the overall lead, and then going into the last test, he knew he had to maintain that lead, and Josh Toth actually won that last test by 1 second over Stu Baylor. So if you do the math, down 8, you win by 14, that puts you up 6, and then you lose by a second, that puts you up somehow a little bit over 3. You know what I mean? There's some decimals in there. You get where I'm going. All right? You know what I mean. So this is going to be an interesting year in National Enduro Series because it is the first time in, I believe, 8 years. I should have looked this up beforehand, but I believe 8 years since the National Enduro champion didn't have the last name of Baylor. Between Stu and Grant Baylor, Grant missing some time due to an injury that he suffered at, I guess, the last National Enduro. Missed the GNCC, missed this weekend's National Enduro, so Stu Baylor had to put the name on his back in more ways than just the jerseys. He went out there to take the win this past weekend. But Josh Toth, like I said, he's been on a tear this season. He's won a lot of races. And, championship is not over yet. But Josh Toth does lead the way out there. But not this past weekend where Stu Baylor was able to get back in the center of the box, get back to his National Enduro winning ways. We wonder if that will carry some confidence into this coming weekend, where he puts it all on the line and goes out there and tries to knock off another GNCC win this season. Speaking of GNCC wins, Josh Toth, the first XC2 rider to overall a race from the second row. Now, he is the original because there has been another person to do it, Grant Davis. Obviously, at the last GNCC, became the second XC2 rider to do that. But Josh Toth would go out, finished the day in the number 2 spot, came out swinging, winning both of the first 2 tests, and as we mentioned, won the very last test as well. So Stu Baylor and Josh Toth split those test wins throughout the day, 3 apiece. Josh Toth won 1 and 2. Stu Baylor went on a tear, winning 3, 4, and 5, and then Josh Toth, as we mentioned, edged him out by just under a second in that last one to claim that last test win. So good day of racing, competitive racing between those 2 guys to wrap up that National Enduro. In the number 3 spot, making his way onto the podium once again, Evan Smith was able to put it on the box just ahead of Jonathan Johnson and Jonathan Gerard, who rounded out your top 5 overall riders. So Evan Smith, we saw him come out this year on his own program, doing his own thing, got a top 5 at GNCC, and he's had some success at the National Enduros and really had a lot of success at the GNCCs as well. Just kind of the silent assassin. You don't hear his name a lot. He's not boisterous. He's not flashy, but he goes out there and he gets the job done, and he puts his head down and he charges, and he proves that this past weekend by grabbing a podium spot at the National Enduro with a 3rd place finish. Speaking of Jonathan Johnson on that Beta Factory Racing Beta machine, at the last GNCC, I think due to whatever reasons, it sounded like Jonathan Johnson, there was a possibility that he may not even race this race in Missouri. Well, he showed up, and he showed out, and he took the Pro 2 win. So I'm sure that he's glad that he ended up going to that one because it paid off in the center of the box, holding up the big check in that Pro 2 class on that Beta motorcycle. So Jonathan Johnson started off a little rocky. 3rd in the first test, and, I guess 4th overall. So that's not rocky at all. 2nd place in class for the 2nd test, and then he would win out in the Pro 2 test after that. So 4 out of 6 test wins for Jonathan Johnson on that 2-smoker, going out there and getting it done at the National Enduro. Jonathan Gerard, who is leading the way in the GNCC points. He goes out 4th place in the Pro 1 class, 5th place overall. Grant Davis, who we just mentioned before, he would win the first 2 tests and get out to the early lead, and would ride it on in some consistent finishes there. 5th place in test 2, and I think that's where test 3. So I think that's where he lost the lead at, but then maintained it throughout the rest of the day to end in the number 2 spot in the Pro 2 class, and then another Beta motorcycle made it onto that Pro 2 podium. Jack Walker was your 3rd place finisher in that Pro 2 class. It was an old Grant Davis sandwich with some Beta bread on it. You know what I mean? Sandwich right in between those Beta machines in 1st and 3rd place. Trevor Bollinger, solid ride, 8th overall. And then Will Sievenpiper, wanted to talk about him real quick. He was on his way to a podium finish, and in the very last test, ended up getting tangled up in some barbed wire. Got some barbed wire tangled up in the wheel, took some time to get that out, and that would unfortunately leave him off of the overall podium. Consistent rides, consistent days for Will Sievenpiper out there, who's been having a really good run in that Pro 2 class this season, but just dropped a little bit too much time in that last test after getting some barbed wire tangled up in the wheel, and would have to end the day just off the podium with a 4th place finish. We'll get on to our top amateur. It was Chase Landers out of the 250A class. Chase Landers, with that win, would also wrap up the 250A National Enduro title. And by the looks of it, looks like we'll see him coming out in the Pro 2 class for the remainder of the National Enduro Series. So we'll see a couple of rounds with Chase Landers up in that Pro 2 class, getting a different row and maybe getting to hang with some of those pro riders and try to pace them as he makes his debut in the Pro 2 class after wrapping up the 250A championship this past weekend. Following people and kind of hanging with some of those Pro 1 riders really seems to be the key, especially in that Pro 2 class. Jonathan Johnson this past weekend was on the same row number 34, with Johnny Gerard. So he made a mention about how he could kind of tag on to Johnny Gerard, see his lines, and kind of keep that pace with him and pull him along to that Pro 2 victory. We saw that a lot last year with Liam Draper winning that Pro 2 championship, kind of hanging on with the guy that was in his row as well. So, yeah. If you're not familiar, those National Enduro rounds, they put one Pro 1 rider and one Pro 2 rider per row and kind of space them out. So every Pro 2 rider, for the most part, will have a Pro 1 rider on their row. You take off in rows of 5, so you can kind of pace the people in your class. Those amateur riders that are also on those rows can try to hang on to those Pro 2 riders for as long as they can, Pro 1 riders as long as they can, and kind of help pull them along as the day goes on throughout the 6 tests of racing. Down in the women's elite class, Rachel Goodish, who we saw competing at the TKO Enduro, I think dusted off her hard enduro bike. She ran the 2-smoker out there. Usually on a 4-stroke for those National Enduro races, she chose to go with the 2-stroke weapon this past weekend, and she would take the women's elite victory over your points leader, Rachel Archer. Rachel Archer battle on her hands at GNCC for that championship, and she's had a pretty good year at the National Enduros, leading the points over there. She would finish 2nd place on the day this past weekend. Just judging by her post, said looks like she hit the deck a few times, so that put her in that number 2 spot. And then Shelby Turner would be your 3rd and final women's elite podium rider with a 3rd place finish of her own and getting on to that podium out there. So that is how the National Enduro shook out for us this past weekend out in Missouri. We'll take a quick opportunity to let you know we're going to be talking about Beta Motorcycles here in a moment when we're looking at these West Coast race results. So, got a little affinity to Beta Motorcycles, and that is because they are the official manufacturer of On the Pipe podcast. They're family-owned and operated and have been since 1905. They manufacture the finest enduro, trials, and dual sport motorcycles that are known for their what? Their premium quality and their rideability. They're the best looking bikes on the market and back it up with their superior performance. Head over to betausa.com for more information on their available models. Find a dealer near you to get yours today. I'll be out on the 2 Hundo Race Edition this weekend. And dude, that thing, I know I went on a rant about it last time, but that thing is so much fun to ride. Every time I ride it, I like it a little bit more. This weekend coming up, just like we mentioned, the hard enduro stuff where I kind of almost for a second thought I was a hard enduro rider. I was trying to ride up rocks at the Trials Training Center down there while filming for TKO. You know what? Might be eyeing up some rocks this weekend in Beckley. You know what I mean? Put the 200 to the test. That thing is fun. So yeah, check them out. Go to betausa.com. Check out the race edition models. They're coming out with some new race models in for the 2025 bikes, so you can check those out as well. They also got the build your own bike program. You can order your bike with your parts that you want already on it. Pretty crazy. Only dirt bike with a warranty, 6-month warranty. What other dirt bike does that? I'll give you a spoiler alert. None of them. So head over to betausa.com, check them out. This episode, as always, is also brought to you in part by Zach Tussle at Raymond James Financial. Zach is a racer, a financial advisor, and good friend of the program that helps his clients win when it comes to retirement and financial planning. The way that the stock market is shifting, the way that the world is turning, there's no better time than right now to reach out to Zach Tussle. Let him know that you are a racer, that you are a listener to OTP. You'll get a free consultation. He'll explain exactly what it is that he does and how he can help you out. And I know I've said this in the past, but you don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to be sitting on 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand in the bank account. You can get started today. And it's easier than you think, and it's going to set yourself up for the rest of your life. If you're 30 years old right now and you put, I don't know, it's like a couple hundred bucks a month into an investment account, by the time you retire or when you're 60 years old, it'll be over $1 million. That is how fast compounding interest works. And I know 30 years isn't fast, but you get it. It's a little bit right now that will get you a lot in the future. So, like I said, you don't have to have a bunch of money right now to have a financial advisor. But if you want to have a bunch of money and not be working till you're 69 years old, you might want to hit up Zach Tussle. Financial Advisors, DenverNC.com, or find him on socials. On the website, there is a thing to fill out a form. Like I said, let him know you listen to OTP. You'll get a free consultation. And then also, as always, DPG, Dimmer's Precision Grading. They're a grading company here in the Carolinas. Any job, big or small, if you need grading, land clearing, gravel, any type of grading work, hit up DPG, Dimmer's Precision Grading.com. Like I said, no job, big or small. They're tearing down houses. They're flattening sections out to put a shed in. They're laying storm drain, all sorts of stuff that they can do. So whether you work for a big contractor and need some grading work done, or you need some stuff done around the house, dimmersprecisiongrading.com. Let's move out to the West Coast. We're going to start with Worcs Racing. It was round number 7 in Vernal, Utah. I want to get to some more West Coast races. Going out to Vegas to Reno, it opened my eyes up to a whole different world. We try to talk about West Coast racing on here, but it's hard not being there. Obviously, all I can do is read off the results. I don't know the people like I know the people out here. I need to get out to some more left coast races. So maybe next year that's what we'll try to do. We'll try to head out west a little bit more because it's such a different world. And I want to be in the thick of it. I want to feel it. I want to smell it. I want to get a taste of it. So when we look at the results, we see, as mentioned, we're going to talk about betas. That's because Dare DeMartille on the factory racing beta machine, the left coast effort out there for the beta boys, goes out, grabs the win, and extends his points lead even farther. So Dare Martille looking to wrap up that Worcs Racing Championship. He puts another nail towards it this past weekend by taking the win, number 1 overall in that Worcs race. In the number 2 spot, it was Jack Simpson on a Yamaha, and then rounding out your 450 Pro class podium, it was Tyler Lynn on a Honda. So you look at the Worcs Racing points right now, Dare DeMartille up 164 total points. He's won 4 rounds this season, a couple seconds and a third. So a solid campaign this year for Dare DeMartille on that beta machine. Tyler Lynn is in the number 2 spot with 137 points. So 27 points is what separates first and second place out there. And then Justin Huft is in the number 3 spot as far as the championship results are concerned. We take a look now at our 250 Pro class. This past weekend, Colton Ake was on the Kawasaki. He would take the Pro 2 class win out there in Vernal. Is it Vernal? Vernal? See, that's why I need to go to West Coast races. I don't know how to pronounce the names. I don't know how to pronounce the towns that they're in. But we're doing our best. We're trying to shine the light. You know what I mean? It's just hard to get that light beam to reach over all the way across the country to the West Coast. But hey, we're giving it a go. Like this next guy. I try to say his name over and over again. I don't know if I get it right. I always confuse myself. It is Kai Aiello, and it's Aiello. And I know every time that it sounds like 3 vowels. Kai IAO. IAO. But then when I go to read it, I get confused about what 3 vowels it is. And so I had to think about it, ponder on it for a second, and that time I actually hit it square on the nose. So if I didn't tell you that I flubbered with it, you wouldn't even know. So Kai Iao gets the number 2 spot on a Husqvarna, and then Jake Alvarez, your 3rd place Pro 2 rider out there aboard the KTM. So that is your Pro Class shakeup out there from the round number 7 of the Worcs Racing Series. As we navigate here through the results, we'll take a look at our women's Pro Class. These ladies out here putting down heaters as well, so we always like to include them in the results. Caitlin Jacobs would go out there and take the win in the women's Pro Class, and she would actually wrap up the championship early. So Caitlin Jacobs, your 2024 women's Pro Class champion aboard a KTM out of Wildomar, California, is your newly crowned Worcs Racing champion. So there you have it. Now we head to Glen Helen, the subject of a lot of controversy in the headlines here lately. I need to do some research. People keep telling me about the owners of Glen Helen and the stuff that has been talked about and going on. I need to look into it any farther. But either way, round number 5 of the West Hare Scramble Series did take place at Glen Helen this past weekend, and taking the overall win aboard a Gas, it was Giacomo Redondi going out there and getting that win in the number 2 spot aboard what else? A Beta Factory Racing Beta machine. Zane Roberts would go out there and put in a 2nd place ride this past weekend to grab 2nd place overall in the day. And then Mateo Oliveira would be your 3rd place rider overall, 3rd place on the box, 3rd place in the Pro Class. Moving down to the 250 Pro Class, Samuel Pretscherer. Pretscherer. It's E-R-E-R, so I think that would be Pretscherer. He is fast enough to go out there and win the 250 Pro Class. I should know how to say his name, but I don't. That's why I need to get out to the West Coast rounds, or maybe get a West Coast correspondent out there to fill us in on what is going on. 2nd place in the Pro 2 class was Leighton Small. Shout out to Leighton Small, having a very pronounceable name. And then in the number 3 spot for the 250 Pro class, it was Jaden Donners getting it done and getting on that 250 Pro Class podium. Dustin Davis, shout out to him aboard the Gas, your top overall finishing amateur, 8th place overall, winner of the 250 A class. Out there getting it done at Glen Helen. We take a look now at the Pro Women's. Ava Silvestri goes out and takes the win aboard a Gas herself. In the number 2 spot, Tara Geiger out there racing on the JCR Honda. She would go out and get 2nd place on the day. And then Brittany Gallegos would round out your Women's Pro Class podium at round number 5 of the West Hare Scrambles out at Glen Helen. So that is going to wrap it up for our race results. As we mentioned, coming into a stacked weekend this weekend, we are a month away from the ISDE happening. And one thing that we failed to mention on last week's podcast is checking in with Dante Oliveira. We talked about Mateo Oliveira getting on the podium with that 3rd place finish overall. His brother Dante Oliveira, who we have seen over here this year in the GNCC at the GNCC's at several different rounds throughout this year. He actually clicked off a GNCC win at Camp Coker. So one of the best guys in the world on a dirt bike. Obviously a ringer at the ISDE last year and one of the leaders of the ISDE trophy team heading into this year. A few weeks ago over summer break, ended up suffering a practice crash and snapped his collarbone in half. So did break that collarbone, but he got it plated up shortly after, and he is on the mend, and all things are pointing to him being good to go for next month's ISDE. He obviously had to miss the rounds this past weekend of the Worcs Series, and where he's defending that number 1 plate, I do believe. But looks like everything should be all good to go for Dante for next month's ISDE. As far as the other storylines, I don't believe there's any big pressing ones that we can talk about or go into detail about right now, but that is your weekend of racing, the recap out here on OTP Tuesday. We got some guests lined up for the future. We need to get back to doing the having the guests on OTP Tuesday. They are way more interesting to listen to talk to than I am. So thank you for hanging in there. Thank you for being with me. We are getting the shows out, letting you know what is going on in the off-road world, but we need to hear it directly from the riders' mouths. So be on the lookout for that. Next week, this weekend, don't forget, check us out on YouTube. We'll have the GNCC race recap up and hopefully start funneling some more people in here to kind of shoot the shit with and talk about. But as always, thank you for being here. Be a friend. Tell a friend something nice. It might change their life. I stole that directly from Pat McAfee. Sorry about it. It's good sentiment. Everyone should listen to it. But, yeah, that's going to wrap up this weekend's episode. We will see you next week. Thank you all for listening.